well, I want to come back to the future before we're done here. But maybe as opposed to thinking about what precision ag in the future might look like, what do you guys see the low hanging fruit is today? I mean, what are our best opportunities today for ag development as you guys travel the state and look at potential projects? What do you think our best opportunity in the near term is?
Well, one of them I'll jump in, I think, is continuing to advance our livestock industry in our state. We grow so much in the terms of wheat and corn and soybeans. And, it goes back to the way things were when we were kids. And, every Saturday morning it was, we were back in the manure spreader in the hog barn and pitching manure out. And then, especially in the winter time when my job was to go out and unload that. I mean, I went right around the shelter belt in the farm, the first field, and that's where the manure got spread. And now I look at it, in the crop farming that I do, it's those fields right around former homesteads that have the highest organic matter and things. And as farms have gotten larger and stuff and more commercialization of that, we went to more commercial fertilizers. And, that's a huge opportunity, not only in having more livestock to consume more of our commodities, but to have that natural fertilizer, which then goes back and builds our soil and builds a better higher productivity for our crops and stuff. So that's number one low hanging fruit for me, is to continue to develop our livestock enterprise.
Well, I was going to say livestock development as well, but I didn't want to steal Mike's thunder, because I know he's a proud new owner of a new hog barn down there. So I wanted to make sure he could talk about that a little bit. But yeah, I would agree with Mike 100%. We have some of the best crop bases in the country, if not the best, for livestock development, for feeding them. And to Mike's point about fertilizer, with the way commercial fertilizer has just gone through the roof, having a hog barn and using those nutrients to spread on your fields is not only economical, but it's environment friendly. You can make some profit off of those hogs. And depending on who you're working with, you might be able to find somebody to labor those barns for you, so you don't have to be the one laboring. You could just be the landlord, if you will, and the integrator can own the livestock. So I think livestock development's first and foremost, coming from a cow-calf operation, I would be so bold to say that we probably chop 90% of the corn we have for silage to feed to our cattle, because it just makes more sense where we're at. And we've transitioned that from a row crop operation into chopping 90% of our corn for silage. So yeah, livestock development, I think, is the low-hanging fruit there for sure.
Very good. Let me start with Mike, and I'll come to you next, Kyle. In your role, Mike, as business development with East River, give us a look under the curtain. How do you approach business development? What do you kind of do to try and help put fuel on a project or encourage folks to invest?
Sure. So a lot of what I really do is it's kind of goes back.
State. How does that look and work and feel?
Sure. A lot of what I'd really do goes back to the old saying of it's not what you know, it's who you know. And it's kind of connecting the pieces and people together to help make a project successful. A lot of, whether it's a small individual project or whether it's a real large project, a lot of times there's just so many unknowns that kind of hamper the process. And it's kind of a lot of what Kyle talked about real early on, and what he does at A1 Development is helping get those projects to that next step so that they can get closer to the finish line. And it's just helping connect those dots together. A lot of it is, whether it's starting talking with local community, if there's a community working on a project, or individuals, or helping tie in and making those connections, knowing people locally that we can help assist with. And it's also kind of thinking through synergies, because if I don't put myself in the mindset of the owners of the business and try to think, how can I help make them more successful, the odds of them being successful is less, right? And or the project picking a site in South Dakota, less success, or less potentially available too, I guess. So you want to think of things, how can I help tie things together for them to maybe some synergies that they're not thinking of, maybe put them in connection with somebody that might be able to do something more efficiently for them. A lot of it, so it's kind of vague, but a lot of it is really just trying to help connect a lot of those pieces together for people. Maybe it's financing that they need, and we have assistance depending the size and the scope of the project that we can help tie in, either bring in financial partners or through a economic development loan fund that the rural electric co-ops have, or whatever the case may be, trying to tie that in. Or maybe they need management or other personnel, and of some people or know of directions they can look. So it's just any of the above.
Yeah.
Very
And I'll
good.
maybe take a little bit different angle on this than Mike did. But in my experience, I don't have the resume Mike has, but in my experience, being extremely palms up with everybody and telling them what the project is up front, this is what we're doing, instead of having several closed door meetings. And those are appropriate. There's a time and a place for those. But, what my experience is, especially at A1 Development, is we go in, we're really palms up, we answer their questions, we let them ask good questions, whether that be with the utility side, or whether that be with the odor that something might bring, or whether that be with, the setbacks or whatever it might be. We try to be really palms up with everybody. And so that seems to bode well, because when they can get comfortable with the developers, Mike and I, as we're promoting business development, then that's when I see progress happen, is when everybody says, okay, this isn't going to ruin the community. This isn't going to ruin the county. They've answered our questions on the front end. And so during the construction process, when stuff starts happening, I already have the answers to those questions. And all the while, where we're staying in contact with the developer, with the community, with people like Mike at East River, just making sure everything goes smoothly. That seems to be how we get people excited about development, especially in rural America, is we go in there and we're not trying to hide any secrets. These are the cards, we lay them on the table and we answer the questions.
Yeah, I really appreciate that perspective, Kyle. If I look at projects that, in my opinion, should have went and didn't, it's often because there was a perception, at least, whether it was reality or not, who knows, but there was a perception that someone was hiding something, and we don't know exactly what's going on. And then the neighborhood gets a little concerned, and that's all it takes to kind of make a negative spin on what could be a real positive development for an area or region or a community. So really appreciate those thoughts. So back to the future just a little bit. And before I do that, I want to just remind our listeners, please use your Q&A section of your web app to ask any questions you might want to ask, and I'll be happy to get those in front of our two panelists here. But at this point, I don't see any, so I'm going to keep the conversation going. So at Precision Ag here at SDSU, they have three real pillars, right? One is conservation focused, one is cropping focused, and one is livestock focused. All three of which are pretty important to our rural landscape and agriculture as a whole. And as we know, as we look and watch the news, it's becoming more and more important to people outside of agriculture, right? How their food is grown, the kind of practices they use are becoming more and more important. How much time do you guys spend thinking about that, talking about that with potential projects and new developments? I'm curious your perspective on those kinds of trends we see out there from a consumer standpoint, and we could go a lot of directions with this, whether it's carbon and beyond. So curious your guys' thoughts around that subject matter.
Well, really quite a bit. And as far as the amount of time, and probably the other answer is not enough. In agriculture, we for a long time, and I know, those of us that have been in agriculture for quite a while have always said, yeah, we need to do more to educate our consumers. And we always think that they understand what we're doing because agriculture has always been here, right? And I think we need to remind, our consumers what we're doing and why we're doing it. And that's so important in all three of those areas, in conservation, in cropping, and in livestock. One thing comes to mind is the new consumer campaign that South Dakota Corn just kicked off the 1st of November here. So we're in the first week of it officially. You'll see some billboards with some bright colors and designs and things on there. And the main message of that is that it all starts with a seed, is kind of the initial tagline. And it's the point is that, it all starts with the placement of that seed in the soil and all the things you can talk about with the crop production and the technologies there. on the conservation things that you know, in a year like this, that on a farm when it was so dry that we actually produced corn with the environmental conditions that we were given, and how did we make that happen? And then who all and what all types of jobs and skills were needed either on or off my farm to make that all happen. And you know, as it goes through from producing the seed to where I deliver it at an ethanol plant, and you know, the number of jobs and types of jobs that are involved in agriculture, you know, from chemists and biologists and genetics, and you know, whether in, you know, back to sales and marketing and machining and all those different things. And so it's trying to communicate and message that it's a lot more than, like we used to say back in my FFA days, it's a lot more than cows, plows, and sows. And I think, you know, just communicating that is definitely something that has to be on the tip of the mind of all of us in agriculture.
Yeah, and maybe just to speak to one of those pillars, you know, conservation, I think is often overlooked. And I think it's extremely important. And I'm biased because I'm a big hunter too. But you know, developing an ecosystem for the agricultural world is extremely important. So you know, our friends over here, Millborn Seeds, they do a great job with cover crops, and cover crops help sequester carbon. So you know, there's so many different things that you can do with conservation, and it gives the ground a break, right? It brings the nitrogen back up. It gets the soil a little bit better for next year's crop. And you know, I'm pretty passionate on that, just because you know, where I'm from in White Lake, not every piece of ground has, you know, an 80% soil rating. And so, you know, we have to work with what that piece of ground is. And so whether that be plant it to switchgrass, plant it to rye, you know, maybe never be corn. And just rotating those crops a little bit farther west, I think you see a little bit more of a crop rotation rather than corn on beans traditionally. But yeah, I mean, just developing an ecosystem and letting nature kind of, you know, be nature. That's how it all started, is, you know, instead of drilling things in the ground that is going to overwhelm the soil, you know, letting nature kind of take its course and developing an ecosystem.
Outstanding. Well, thank you, gentlemen. We're down to just a couple minutes left. As we get to the final couple minutes, are there any parting shots that the two of you would like to leave with our listeners? Is there anything that comes to mind that we haven't covered that you want to make sure we share?
Well, one thing I would say is I'm assuming that anyone listening in here has an interest, if not a passion, for agriculture, and particularly in this region. And I would say the big thing is to just get involved and get engaged, and remember that you are a part of something bigger than just what your focus is, what your career is, what your job is, and think big picture, and think about how you can be an advocate for agriculture and help explain to those who aren't directly involved in agriculture what it is we do and how we do it and why we do it. And like Kyle said, you know, the conservation piece of it, we often forget about that, but it has so many benefits. You know, if you take care of the soil will take care of you if you're a producer, but you can also incorporate things that are good for the environment, good for habitat, and just so many things. So it's tell your story. So be an active voice in agriculture.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if I was going to leave everybody with one thought, it would be to maybe get ready and do a little research on the carbon side of things. I think that's rolling in hot and heavy. We didn't get much time to talk about it here. But you know, I've learned a lot about carbon in the last 6 months, and 7 months ago, I didn't know anything about carbon. So I think it's really coming quickly. And I think that's something that farmers can see some value from. It's not even that you have to change your farming practices, rather than how to figure out how to capture that carbon and you know, sell it to somebody who cares about that. So I think that's one thought that I would leave. And I would be remiss if I didn't put a plug in for the South Dakota Ag Foundation. If you don't know what they're doing, I would check them out. Great foundation with a good mission. So thanks, Nate.
Hey, thanks, Kyle, and thanks, Mike. Let me leave all of you then with a final thought, and they both hit on it really well. You know, we hear in the news a lot about ESG, right? Environmental, social, government, governance. And a lot of times in ag, we like to shake our head at that, but I think these two have really shared some great perspective today with us on why we need to embrace that. We've got a great story to tell. And I think we've got more opportunity around those subjects than we do things to be concerned about. So the work being done in precision ag and ag development across the state is very exciting. And the future is very bright. So we encourage you all to engage and be a part of it.